Before you reach for hair dye, before you tell yourself that gray is just what happens now, listen closely, because your hair may be trying to tell you something far more important than a cosmetic complaint. Gray hair is not always a sentence. In some people, it is a signal. In some people, it is a warning. And in a meaningful number of cases, especially when the graying seems to come early, come fast, or come with other changes in the body, it may be connected to a nutritional problem that can sometimes be corrected. The most important nutrient to think about is vitamin B12. Gray hair is usually linked to age and genetics, because as we get older, melanocyte activity slows and pigment production fades. But in some cases, gray hair can also be associated with B12 deficiency or thyroid imbalance. And that matters more than most people realize. Because once people see silver strands, they often think in one direction only. Cover it up, dye it, hide it, move on. But the smarter question is not, how do I hide the gray? The smarter question is, why is this happening now? Because when the body changes, the hair often changes before the person notices anything else. Hair is part of the skin's pigmentation system. The color comes from melanin, and melanin comes from melanocytes. As those pigment systems weaken with age, hair can lose its color. But when the process seems to be moving faster than expected, especially after the age of 60, it is worth asking whether the body is missing something essential. Now, let me be careful and honest with you, because this is important. I am not telling you that one vitamin will magically make every gray hair turn black again. Biology is not a cartoon. Genetics matter. Aging matters. Stem cells matter. Stress matters. Lifestyle matters. But what I am telling you is that if your gray hair is being worsened by a vitamin deficiency, especially vitamin B12 deficiency, then correcting that deficiency may help the body recover part of what it has lost. Research reviews note that some causes of graying are reversible, particularly when a nutritional deficiency is involved. That does not mean every gray hair is reversible. It means some are. And that tiny difference is exactly where hope lives. Why vitamin B12? Because B12 is not just another vitamin on a label. It is a core nutrient involved in DNA synthesis, red blood cell formation, and nerve function, and it is found mainly in animal products such as meat, dairy, and eggs. It also depends on a proper absorption process in the stomach and intestines, which becomes more fragile as we age. The National Institutes of Health notes that B12 deficiency can cause several physical and neurological symptoms, and older adults are at greater risk because absorption often declines with age. In other words, after 60, B12 is not a small detail. For many people, it becomes one of the most important nutrients to pay attention to. Think about what that means in real life. A person eats less, appetite changes, stomach acid can decrease, the body struggles to pull B12 from food. Years pass. At first, there may be no obvious sign. Then fatigue appears, then weakness, then numbness, then memory becomes less sharp. And somewhere in that slow unfolding, the hair starts losing pigment too. That is why we cannot treat gray hair as only a beauty issue. Sometimes it is the visible tip of a deeper nutritional iceberg. One review on cutaneous findings of B12 deficiency describes hair changes among the skin-related signs of deficiency, and dermatology references note that in some cases, gray hair may be caused by B12 deficiency. Now imagine the body as a living orchestra. Every system depends on timing, balance, and supply. If one section goes silent, the music changes. B12 is part of that orchestra. When it is low, the body does not simply become a little tired. It may begin to show that shortage in multiple places at once. Hair can thin, pigment can fade, energy can drop, the tongue can change, the nervous system can complain, and because the changes are gradual, people often blame age alone. But age is not always the whole story. Age may be the stage, but deficiency may be the actor. That is the reason I want you to pause before dyeing your hair. Not forever, not out of fear, just long enough to ask a better question. If your gray hair appeared gradually over decades, that is normal aging. If it has accelerated, if it came on strongly, if you are over 60 and also dealing with fatigue, tingling, forgetfulness, low appetite, or digestive issues, it is worth discussing B12 testing with a clinician. The goal is not to panic. The goal is to investigate, because when you understand the reason, you stop fighting the symptom and start supporting the system. And this is where the story becomes even more interesting. Gray hair is not only about pigment cells running out of color, it is also about stem cells. NIH Research Matters reported that the stem cells responsible for hair color can become stuck with age, unable to properly move between the states needed to keep hair pigmented. In other words, the biology of graying is deeply tied to the aging of the pigment system itself. That is why no one should promise a miracle. But it is also why science keeps looking for ways to preserve or restore that system. Gray hair is not random, it follows biology, and biology, sometimes, can be supported. Still, the presence of gray hair does not automatically mean deficiency. Most gray hair is still driven by age and genetics. DermNet explains that gray hair is partly due to inherited traits and aging, and that with increasing age, melanocyte activity slows and eventually stops. So let us not oversimplify. Let us not turn every silver strand into a vitamin drama. But let us also not ignore the cases where the body is giving a real nutritional signal. The art is in knowing the difference. That is what smart health looks like. Not fear, not fantasy, but discernment. Now let us talk about the vitamin itself in a practical way. Vitamin B12 is mainly obtained from animal foods, such as red meat, dairy, and eggs. People who eat very little animal food, people with absorption problems, and older adults are more vulnerable to low B12. The stomach has to release B12 from food, then intrinsic factor has to help carry it to the intestine for absorption. When stomach acid is lower, or when intrinsic factor is not working properly, absorption drops. That is one reason older adults can develop deficiency even when they are not starving. They may simply not be absorbing efficiently. This is where many people make a mistake. They think, I eat enough, so I cannot be deficient. But eating enough is not the same as absorbing enough. That is especially true with B12. The body can be well fed and still be undersupplied. This is why age matters so much after 60. The digestive system changes, medications can interfere, stomach acid may decrease, atrophic gastritis and other digestive problems can reduce absorption. So when a senior sees more gray hair, the question is not simply what they eat, but what their body can actually take in and use. And this is why B12 deficiency can be so deceptive. It does not always announce itself loudly. Sometimes it whispers. A little tiredness here, a little brain fog there, a little imbalance, a little tingling, a little loss of color in the hair. People dismiss it because each symptom on its own seems small, but the body is not speaking in isolated sentences. It is speaking in patterns. When the pattern includes gray hair, plus fatigue, plus age-related absorption issues, B12 deserves attention. There is also another truth that deserves respect. Stress can affect hair too. NIH reported that stress can cause hair to gray prematurely by affecting the stem cells responsible for regenerating hair pigment. That means your hair is listening to more than your birthday. It is listening to your biology, your stress load, your recovery, your sleep, and your nourishment. So when someone says, "I went gray overnight," we should not laugh it off as a poetic exaggeration. Sometimes the body does not wait for permission to show the pressure it is under. And yet, even with stress, the message is not hopelessness. The message is awareness. When the body is overwhelmed, it often needs support, not blame. Better sleep, better nutrition, less smoking, better stress management, medical evaluation where needed. Because if your hair is turning gray and your body is running low on reserves, the answer is not to punish yourself with shame. The answer is to rebuild. And rebuilding starts with the basics: nutrition, diagnosis, and consistency. Now let us return to the vitamin at the center of this conversation. Vitamin B12 is not a vanity vitamin. It is a survival vitamin. It supports the cells that divide rapidly. It supports the nerves that carry signals. It supports blood production. Without enough of it, the body struggles. That is why low B12 is not something to brush off just because your only visible symptom seems to be a few silver hairs at the temple. The visible sign may be mild, but the underlying problem may not be. And there is another layer. Hair pigmentation depends on active melanocytes and healthy stem cell function. Aging naturally reduces that function, but when deficiency is added on top of aging, the decline can become more noticeable. That is why some people in later life seem to gray suddenly, while others age more slowly. The difference is not always just good genes or bad genes. It may also be nutrition, absorption, and overall metabolic resilience. In that sense, gray hair is a visible biography of what the body has been through. So what should a person actually do? First, do not self-diagnose from a video alone. Second, do not assume every gray hair is a B12 problem. Third, do not ignore gray hair if it is paired with other symptoms. The sensible next step is a conversation with a clinician and, if appropriate, blood work to check B12 status and other possible contributors. Because yes, B12 is important, but thyroid issues, iron status, and other factors can matter too. The goal is not to chase a single explanation. The goal is to find the real one. This is especially important because many people wait too long. They notice the gray hair, they buy dye, they continue life, months pass, then weakness becomes normal. Then they forget what well-rested felt like. Then the body speaks more loudly. It is always better to listen early. Hair may not be the most dramatic tissue in the body, but it is often one of the earliest to reflect a nutritional imbalance. That is not because hair is more important than the heart or the brain. It is because hair is easier to see. It is the body's surface-level messenger. If B12 is indeed low, the treatment is not to chase a trend. The treatment is to correct the deficiency under medical guidance. In some people, that may mean diet changes. In some people, it may mean supplements. In some people, especially if absorption is the issue, it may mean more direct replacement. The important thing is that B12 deficiency is treatable. Cleveland Clinic notes that vitamin B12 deficiency is a treatable condition, and NIH materials emphasize that deficiency has clear causes and symptoms. This is good news. It means you are not helpless. It means you are not trapped in a cosmetic problem when a medical issue may be part of the picture. But let me say something even more important. Healing is not the same as instant reversal. The body usually does not work like a switch. More often it works like a garden. You water it, you feed it, you clear what harms it, you wait, you protect the roots, and over time, new growth reflects the care you gave. That is how I want you to think about hair and nutrition, not as a cosmetic emergency, as a biology project. Because when the internal environment improves, the external signs often improve too. Not always fully, not always immediately, but often meaningfully. That means the real question is not only, can B12 help? The real question is the body missing B12, and is that shortage part of the reason the hair is changing? If the answer is yes, then yes, correction matters. If the answer is no, then forcing B12 will not do what genetics and aging have already decided. That is why honest health advice is powerful. It protects hope from becoming hype. And in a world full of exaggeration, honest hope is rare and valuable. You may also be wondering whether the foods you eat can make a difference. Absolutely. Because B12 comes mainly from animal products, older adults and people with restrictive diets need to be thoughtful about where they get it. The goal is not to overcomplicate dinner. The goal is to make sure the diet actually supports the body's needs. That can include meat, fish, eggs, dairy, and for some people, fortified foods or medically guided supplementation. The right approach depends on the person, the labs, and the absorption story. And here is something that often gets missed. The body's need for B12 is not dramatic, but it is constant. Tiny amounts matter. That is how biology works with certain vitamins. Small supply, big effect. The failure is not always loud. The effect is often cumulative. That is why someone may feel fine for years while the body slowly drifts into deficiency. Then one day they see the hair, the fatigue, the forgetfulness, the tongue changes, the nerve symptoms, and they finally realize the problem was building quietly for a long time. So when we talk about gray hair after 60, we must resist the urge to think shallowly. Gray hair is not just a dye decision, it is a health conversation. It can be a reflection of age, yes. It can be a reflection of family history, yes. But in some cases, it can also be a reflection of nutritional decline, especially B12 deficiency, and sometimes thyroid imbalance or other medical factors. That means the wise person does not guess. The wise person checks. I want you to hear the message behind the message. Your body is not betraying you when it grays. It may be asking for attention, and attention is powerful. Attention changes outcomes. Attention finds deficiencies. Attention catches patterns earlier. Attention gives you the chance to respond before the problem becomes larger. That is true for hair, but it is also true for the heart, the brain, the bones, the blood, and the nervous system. Gray hair may be visible first, but it should invite a bigger conversation about internal health. If you are over 60, I especially want you to think in terms of maintenance rather than rescue. Maintenance means supporting the systems that age touches first: absorption, nutrition, sleep, movement, stress control, and medical follow-up. It means remembering that the body in later life is not failing, it is changing, and changing bodies need different care. B12 becomes more important because absorption can decline. That does not mean everyone needs the same solution. It means everyone deserves a more thoughtful one. So yes, there is a vitamin worth paying attention to here. But the deeper message is even more important. Do not let the hair dye the story before you read the body's own text. Read the signs. Respect the signs. Check the possible causes. Support the body from the inside. Because if the gray hair is partly driven by low B12, then your best move may not be concealment, it may be correction. And correction is always more powerful than camouflage. And maybe that is the real lesson today. Gray hair is not always something to fight. Sometimes it is something to investigate. Sometimes it is something to understand. Sometimes it is the body's quiet way of saying, look deeper. And when you look deeper, you often find that the answer is not vanity, but vitality. Not color, but chemistry. Not age alone, but age plus a fixable shortage. That is why vitamin B12 deserves a seat at the table in any serious conversation about hair graying after 60. So before you dye your hair, pause. Ask whether your body is asking for support. Ask whether a deficiency might be part of the picture. Ask whether the silver is only age or age plus something reversible. And then take the next wise step, not the fastest one. Because the fastest answer hides the symptom. The wisest answer protects the person.